How much do you still think about, you know, I guess, losing it all?
Always. You never lose that. If you lose that, you're never going to go forward.
So, so one of the questions I always like to ask people is what's one of the scariest moments in your life? I mean, obviously we talk about getting out of your comfort zone. Any stories for us?
I'm always scared, and I love it. For me, if it doesn't scare me, it's just pointless. It's a waste of time. Like I said to you before, I lied. I was going to football clubs and lying. Being a kid, going to West Ham from South London, going all the way to Chadwell Heath, not knowing that one, my lie is going to be convincing, and two, they might send me packing. I'm pooing myself. But at the end of the day, look what I achieved from it. You know, going into schools, advising schools on how to run. And I said, I had 3 A to C's, and I'm doing that. So it was always that step. And before I did that, my ex-girlfriend, funny enough, her teacher was, her mum was a teacher. And I literally studied files like that, LCP files, which have lesson plans in it, because I thought, okay, I know how to engage. I know how to make things fun, but I don't know structure. And I was scared, but I've studied it, and again, I grew a business from it. So I'm always scared, and I will always continue to be scared.
But I was you say you're always going to continue to be scared. But I was going to ask you. I mean, you're doing that. You know, I guess doing those lies and that hustle and stuff time and again. Do you not find it easier next time? I mean, do you still have that same level of scaredness as the first time, or is it just because you're pushing the boundaries of how much you can take the piss?
You don't get used to it, because I feel like if it doesn't scare me, so if it's something that I'm kind of used to, I'm not going to go to it, you know. And even just going back to me saying I set up the business in schools, I got too comfortable, and I didn't like that. It didn't challenge me enough. So if I look at something new and I think, okay, yeah, you know, it scares me a bit, it's a bit challenging, I'm not going to do it, because it's not going to motivate me. I need something big, and I think I've always had it. But one thing with professional football, what it does is it makes you an animal for competition. It makes you want to be a winner. It makes you want to step up for that challenge. You know, it's like players always wanted to play for the top teams and wanting to win. In a way, off the pitch, I'm playing football still.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think it also has a lot to do with ego, you know, and pride, and, you know, fear of judgment, fear of being seen in full transparency, and, you know, because it requires radical truth. If you're going to go bankrupt, you need to be prepared to say, look, here's my truth. This is the truth here, bang.
I mean, I guess that's probably something I've never suffered myself, because I've always never had an issue being honest along the journey anyway. You know, I think maybe for a lot of people it's an issue because of today's, you know, Instagram society, where, you know, where you look at everybody's Instagram page and Facebook page, and everyone's living their best life, and then how do they get out of that? You know, I mean, I've never, and not just in today's world, but, you know, ever since I've done business, I've never had an issue, you know, talking about the bad, or, you know, or the good, or being, you know, or being transparent about what's going on in my life. So.
Just I have to say that actually, you know, Matt just mentioned, you know, he's not afraid to be honest, which is why this wasn't a situation for him, or why he could deal with it, why there was no fear, or not as much fear as anyone else or other people when going bankrupt, or, you know, when having to go out there and do business. I think you have a lack of fear because you're not trying to be someone else or be seen in a certain way. And I say this sincerely, and I said it outside, you know, by your Ferrari. I said, Matt, we're talking about truth. And Matt was asking me about my coaching, and I said, really what makes me an extraordinary coach is my ability to be radically honest with people. And Matt was like, yeah, this is an ingredient that I have, that I own, that I believe, you know, you have to have. And I think when it comes to taking massive risks, either in failure or in success, or in the pursuit of success, I think that fearlessness and the ability to be honest and be seen for all that you are, I think that is a massive ingredient for success. Now,
you know what, as well, I think it's a massive ingredient for happiness and simplicity, and simplicity 100%. As well, because you know, if you're always honest about your situation, then you've never got any risk of being caught out in your life. Whether or not you're looking to take massive risks and grow your business or anything else, if you're just looking to live a normal life, you know, if you don't post pictures on your Instagram where you've borrowed someone's Ferrari, then you don't have to worry about being caught in Aldi driving your Fiat Punto, do you? You know, I think I think so many of people's stresses in life come from such unnecessary bullshit like that.
So we'll often poll a lot of my guests or audience or other members of the UK public, and what was an interesting stat for me was that over 2/3 of the UK population actually have a desire to start a business, but 90% of people don't do it for either fear of failure, which is one of the main reasons for men, or kind of imposter syndrome for women. And obviously you're a young person, well, you were an even younger person in a let's say an older business world, and you've been very successful, I guess, dominating and making yourself known, and not letting age be a barrier, and interacting with much older people. What are your kind of top strategies for the youngsters of today to kind of own their space and boss it with the oldies?
With the fossils.
Yeah.
I just genuinely believe that age is no barrier to success. People love to say, like, you should start something at this age, you should be married at this age. There's these intrinsic timelines that society poses onto us from a young age. Like, you shouldn't start a business till you're 30, like when you're a bit more financially stable. Like, I just think throw out the rule book on when the right time to start something is. And I was 21 when I started Milk Plus, and I did feel a lot of external judgment from older people, or from people my age, like thinking, God, you're brave, like putting yourself out there. But that is the first step, putting yourself out there. And I actually think genuinely that being younger and being a bit naive is not a bad thing at all, because it means that you aren't kind of having like a hidden agenda, trying to like second guess things. You're coming at things with a fresh perspective, and you're learning as you go. As young people, you're very malleable to information. That's why it's so much easier to learn a language when you're younger, because you are just an information sponge. So I think if you just really flip it on its head and think, actually, I have the advantage by starting young. I can fail more times and pick myself up, dust myself off, start again, than if I waited till I was 30, because that's what society says. So my advice to young people is always just start and figure it out on the way, and just ignore the external pressures of society and the old people judging you.
So Soho, Italian restaurants, Italy, Maltese mafia. Tell me more.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised that there was a lot of Maltese that were playing the tough boys, the hardest boys in Soho, and some of them used to come to the restaurant and I'd have a few fights after dinner, just because they didn't want to pay the bill, and that kept reoccurring over and over again. And young Aldo Zilli, 25-year-old with a new restaurant, how scared was I? In a scale of 1 to 10, about 12, but I didn't show it. That's what made me survive.
Was it prevalent around the Soho area then? Back
yeah, it was.
Time?
Yeah, in those days there was quite a lot of hard sort of. There are a few Italians as well, but it was more fun than it was scary, to be honest. I mean, you live in Soho, so you have to expect. There was peep shows, there was sex shops, there was everywhere, until they cleaned them up.
You got to take the rough with the smooth, right?
Yeah.
If you
Exactly.
want the sex shows, you've got to pay the Maltese mafia.
Oh,
I was expecting a bit of rat poison in the spaghetti bolognese.
I absolutely loved it.
For me, there's two kinds of fear. There's real fear and there's psychological fear. Now, real fear, as it says, is real. Let's say, for example, you're going to jump out of an aeroplane without a parachute and you're scared of it. Well, listen, you should be. You're going to die, right? But psychological fear, that's fear that you build up in your head for, and the only place it exists is in your head. So, the way I like to look at it is this. Let's ignore the real fear. Let's talk purely about psychological fear. I always say, what is the alternative to not doing what it is that I'm scared of? So let's say, for example, it's speaking in public. You know, maybe if you're afraid to speak in public and you're a business person, let's say, you know, maybe you're going to be unable to do the presentation that you need to do to close a deal or to, you know, to make your business successful. You know, maybe you're a guy or a girl at school and you need to be able to speak in front of the class to be able to, you know, to be able to get the marks you need for your exam to get you into uni. You know, as uncomfortable as it may be to, you know, to have that public speaking situation, I think you're going to find it a lot more uncomfortable if you don't make your business successful or if you don't get into uni. So for me, psychological fear is really just about balancing. You know, as scared as I am to do this, I'm going to be a lot more scared or unhappy if this outcome happens. I think, you know, one important thing as well to take away from this as well is, you know, people really worry a lot about what other people think. You know, and again, this is perfect with the example of speaking in public. So the reality is, you know, people just don't look at you in the same negative way that you convince yourself they do. You know, again, using public speaking as an example, you know, you convince yourself that you're up there, your colleagues are laughing at you, your classmates are laughing at you. Listen, 99% of people are fundamentally decent and they want you to succeed, and you know, they're only laughing at you in your head. So just get out there and do it. Trust me, you're not going to be anywhere near as bad as you've built yourself up to be in your head. And you're going to look back and wonder what all the fuss was about. So I hope that helped you. I look forward to talking to you again next week.